Hey, what's going on? Thanks for checking the channel out today. So today I'm assembling a small block Chevy 350 small block Chevy. It's actually 40 over. So let's see, 30 over would be a 355. 40 over is probably a 356 or 357. I don't know, I have to do the math on that to get the exact. Might still be a 355, who knows. Anyway, we had to go 40 over on this block. Let me uncover it. This block came out of a 1949 Ford F1 pickup truck. Let me show you. We already did all the suspension work and the brake work on this truck. I'll leave a link in the description below on it. We got the truck in, and that's the first thing I wanted to do, just to get it on, because the tires were going flat, suspension was bad. We got all the suspension done, got all the brakes done, and that was like stage one, right? That was stage one. That's the truck. For you guys who haven't seen the video, I did a couple videos, I believe, on this truck when I was doing all the suspension. So this thing has been sitting in a field for years, and then it got put in a barn for a long time, years. Doesn't really care what it looks like. He just wants it to run good, he wants it to stop good and drive good. So we're basically just redoing the whole truck. The only thing that's not going to be done is the paint job, and he may get that done at a later date, but for now we're going to make it, you know, run good, drive good, the whole deal. So we did kingpins, had to do a whole kingpin set. We had to do brakes, master cylinder, wheel cylinders, 2 drums, hoses, I mean everything on the brakes, all that, all the shocks. The wheel bearings were good. Was able to repack the wheel bearings, put new grease seals in, and then we were planning on just doing a top end kit on the motor, and well, we couldn't. I went ahead and ran a compression test on this motor. It had 2 completely dead cylinders, and all the other ones had low compression except one. I think 1 or 2 had decent compression. So we pulled the motor out, pulled it completely apart, and it was a mess. It was just a total mess. One cylinder was in such bad shape, we had to go 40 over to get it to clean up. It almost cleaned up on 30, but it had a couple little bad spots. 40 over took care of it. So basically, you know, we're doing one of our SP you know, engine packages on this. It's kind of an affordable package. We're using a hypertectic pistons instead of a forged aluminum piston. We did convert it to a roller camshaft. We're using a Howard's retrofit hydraulic roller cam. It's going to pull to about 6,200. We didn't really want to sing it up too high. I mean, basically the whole deal, the engine or the block, let me show you. I've already got it painted. It really turned out nice. Machine shop does such a good job. It's almost like it's been sandblasted. I mean, it is unbelievable how this block looked and how it came out. So when I get it, the only thing I have to do is I just get brake clean and I spray the whole block down. First I'll blow everything out, which really doesn't even need, because it's like you could eat off of this motor when we get them back from the machine shop. But I go ahead and I blow some brake clean all through the oil galleys. I blow everything out, and then I brake clean everything that I'm going to paint on the block. Then I tape off everything, and then I put about 2 to 3 good coats, maybe 4 coats of paint. And I want to make sure that that paint does not come off, you know, in the future. That's why it's really important to make sure the block is totally clean of any grease, residue, fingerprints, any of that stuff. So I went ahead and got the cam slid in. I got it all lubed up, got the cam in there, got all the freeze plugs in. I went ahead and gapped all the rings. I gap them by cylinder. I got all the cylinders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got them all gapped. You know, it's pretty simple. You know, gapping, I'm sure there's so many videos out there on gapping rings. I'm not even going to go into that right now, but with a hypertectic piston, you kind of want to have a little bit wider of a gap. Not so much the Speed Pro pistons, because they do have a real, if you look, they've got a very thick top here to the piston, so you don't really have to gap them too much. But I want to be on the safe side. I do gap these just a little bit more. You know, that way he wants to have fun in this thing. It's going to run good. This setup, we're using some Airflow Research 195cc heads, and he's got a really nice intake. We're just going to have to do a lot of cleanup. I'm actually going to be using a sandblaster box, and I'll be cleaning all these up, you know, and then repainting them. But yeah, it's got a nice intake on it, and it's got an Edelbrock carburetor. I think it's a 650 or 700, I'm not sure, but we got to rebuild that one, or we might just change it out and put like a quick fuel carb on it. Anyway, here's the pistons. So what we ended up doing is, so the full race prep treatment that we get on these blocks, they clean the block, they bore the block, they torque plate hone it. That's where they torque a plate down on the block that will mimic a head, and then they hone it. They put new cam bearings in. They line hone the mains. All the main bearings are perfectly straight, line honed. They machine the block, machine the deck just a little bit for us to clean it up. Let's see, they recondition all the rods. Okay, they take these rods, they machine them down. Got ARP bolts in here, and then they re-hone the big end of the rod, make it perfectly round again. We also get the rotating assemblies balanced. Every engine that I build, we get them balanced. Even if we go back to a stock style rebuild with the aftermarket pistons, always get them balanced. You don't want to take a chance on having any vibrations. We're going to be using a SFI balancer on this thing. We use the flex plate that came off of the motor, since it was, you know, everything was matched. This is an internal balanced block, I believe it was. Some of these are internal, some of them are external. So we did get it balanced, and this could also make a big difference on, you know, RPM quickness. And I've already cleaned up and painted these 4 bolts. I've painted this plate black. We have a black powder coated black timing cover going on it, and a black oil pan, and with that orange, it's going to really set it off nice. The intake is aluminum, like you've seen over there, but it's very disgusting. But we're going to bead blast it, sandblast it in the cabinet, make it look brand new again, and if it doesn't come out looking good enough, then I'll paint it. And I'll show you what I use to paint aluminum. You know, if we have a bracket that's aluminum, or if we want something to look aluminum, this is the stuff you want to use right here. It's made by VHT. It's a high temp header paint. It's actually a ceramic coating paint, and it looks exactly like aluminum. There's no shine to it, nothing. When you sandblast aluminum, or let's say you get a brand new piece of aluminum, you know, a bracket, an intake, anything like that, you clean that thing up really well and you spray it with that stuff, it looks brand new. I mean, I'm telling you, it looks just like a factory aluminum, you know, piece. So if the intake doesn't clean up good and it's a little stained, I'll paint it with that stuff and it will look brand new. That's what I basically do whenever I do these builds. You know, a lot of the brackets get really old and stained looking, and some of them just will not clean up good when you blast them. And if not, I just paint them with that ceramic aluminum paint. It looks brand new. It looks like a brand new bracket. So, but yeah, this thing ought to look good when it's all done. I've got a lot of the stuff sitting here on the floor. It's even the valve covers. So I went ahead and just bought this timing cover. Was pretty nasty, and you can get these so cheap. There was no sense in worrying about that one. Now, these valve covers are the old school Mickey Thompson valve covers, and I want to try to clean them up. I want to put them in the blasting cabinet and see how they come out. And you know, there again, if they don't come out too good, I could go ahead and paint them with the aluminum paint. I wouldn't mind getting you know, getting another set of valve covers, because it would look good if these were, you know, maybe a orange or black, and then the tops, you know, were silver or whatever. So we may end up doing that. Heck, you can get valve covers pretty reasonable, man. They're not that expensive. So we may just do that. He was wanting to keep them and try to clean them up and stuff, but you know, I don't know. We'll see what we can do. But so I just wanted to kind of show you what I was into here today, and I'm going to try to get this thing buttoned up, you know, by the end of the week. I've already got the rings gapped. I've already checked clearance on the rod bearings, the main bearings, and I'm going to go ahead and get these rings on the pistons and then start sticking them in there. That way I can get this short block completely wrapped up. Once I get the pistons in, I'm gonna go ahead and get the timing chain on. I'm gonna degree the cam in. I'm probably not gonna have to degree it, but I'm gonna just check it. And if I have to degree it, I'll degree it. That way I can get the oil pan on, timing cover on, and this thing will be good to go. All right, so I'm kind of getting these rods and pistons ready to drop in the block. I've got these all done. This is kind of how I normally do it. So I took the caps off the rods, or before I took the caps off the rods, I marked the cap in the rod. A lot of times these factory rods they'll be numbered, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'll have a 1 here and a 1 on the rod. 2 on the cap, 2 on the rod. Well, these didn't have any numbers on them. There's no numbers anywhere. And these caps, they really will only go on one way. I mean, you can flip them around backwards, but on these caps, the way that they're set up, the way they're designed, is you have, let's see if I can get in there. You have a little notch on the cap, and then you have a little notch on the rod on the opposite side. Both of those notches will go together on the same side. Same side right here. At least on these small block Chevys. Now some other engines may be different. But this side of the rod and the cap is a little bit thicker than this side. Okay, and this side of the cap is what is always going to go against the crankshaft. This side of the cap and rod will go against the other rod on the other side of the engine. So anyway, the way I like to do it is I pull the caps off, and I go ahead and I get all the rings on. Once I get all the rings on, I'll go ahead and place the bearings in the rod and in the cap. And you want to make sure it's all good and clean. You don't want any oil between the bearing and the rod. You want that to be a dry fit. You don't want to oil it at all. Same on the cap. You don't want any oil between the cap and the bearing. You want a nice, clean, dry fit. And then of course, before you drop these pistons in, you put bearing lube on just this side of the bearings, okay? So anyway, I've got these all ready to go in, and then that way when I drop them in, I know which way to put the cap. I don't have to look at it twice. I've already got them marked. If they're not marked already, you can put a little mark on them. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and do this one and show you guys how to put the rings on. Whenever you get pistons and rings, they will come with directions. It's very simple. It just tells you how to space the rings apart. It's no big deal. The first thing you want to do though is you want to make sure that these rings will glide easy in these grooves and there's no nicks on the ring or on the groove. If there's any sticking at all, you got to have a problem. Those rings need to slide in and out of these grooves freely, right? So that's the first thing you want to do. I'm going to set this camera up here. So I also go ahead and mark the pistons. If the rods are not marked, like I say, a lot of rods are usually marked, and if not, I just mark the pistons. I just basically marked them 1 through 8 on a small block Chevy. The firing order's different on small block Ford, but you know, these rods and pistons are already put together in the correct way. If you notice, you have these 2 valve reliefs. This is the intake valve, that's the exhaust valve. The intake valve is larger than the exhaust valve. So if you're looking at the motor, so there's the valley pan where the lifters go. I'm on the side of the block right now. Okay, this is going to be cylinder 2 on the small block Chevy. Cylinder 1's on the driver's side front. Cylinder 2 is on the passenger side front. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, on small block Fords, number 1 is on the passenger front, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they're different. So the way these pistons go in the block, the 2 valve reliefs, the double humps have to face in towards the lifter valley. The flat part will face out towards the block. That's how they sit in there, just like that, all of them. Now, as far as the way these rods go on the pistons, they go on a certain way. On this number 2 cylinder, this cylinder is faced, it's a little bit towards the back of the block. The number 1 is a little bit towards the front of the block. So on this side of the rod is going to be against the crankshaft. That side of the rod will be against the other rod for number 1 cylinder. So if you come over here on this side, pistons are still the same, double humps towards the lifter valley. Same thing, this side of the rod will be towards the crankshaft, that side of the rod will be towards the other rod on the other cylinder, right across from it. And if you look down in there, you have one side of the crankshaft there, one side there. See, these rods were they're designed to only go on one way. I don't know if you can tell, that side is a little thicker than that side. The thicker side goes towards the crankshaft. The thinner side goes towards the other rod on the other side of the block. That's pretty much how that goes. If you ever had to install pistons onto the rods, let me set this camera up here. So these are pressed on, okay, because they're stock rods. If you got aftermarket, you know, if you did a forged rotating assembly or whatever, it's going to have, you know, H-beam or I-beam rods. They're going to have a bushing in them, and the pins will be full floating. They will float in the piston like this one does, but they will not be pressed in the rod. They will float in the rod as well. So you would actually put the rods on yourself, and they're held in by spiral locks or clips or whatever. So you got to make sure you put the rods on the same way, or the correct way. Once you put them rods on the right way on the piston, you can just start putting them in. So I just wanted to kind of go over that a little bit for you guys that didn't know that. Now, as far as putting these on, this is just a general rule. You know, where the gaps are. You know, you can pretty much do them anyway, just as long as you have all the gaps spaced apart. But this is how they pretty much tell you to do it. This is just a general rule. So this being inside the block, this side is the front of the motor. So basically the front of the motor here, they say to put this gap on the spring for the oil ring on the top of the piston as you're facing in the block. And you just want to make sure it's not overlapped or anything, it just butts together. Then you get one of the oil rings, which is real thin. Remember the gap is here for the spring. This gap, you can put it, you want one gap here and one gap here, and it doesn't matter top or bottom, it doesn't matter. I just always start here. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want that gap to be spaced out. And I usually put my thumb in there to kind of hold it in. I take my time so you don't break the ring. And then just make sure it works inside the groove. It will go in between the spring and the piston. And you just kind of use your fingers to walk it around, and then pull this out so you don't scratch the piston, but not very much. And it pops in there just like that. And it's always good to leave a little bit of a gap until you close it up with the spring compressor, but it will never go all the way. When I checked the gap on these little oil rings to the cylinder wall, we had about 16 to 18 thousandths. And that's what you want. You want a minimum of 16 thousandths on an oil ring. So that's the first one. Then you get the second one, and you basically do the same thing, except instead of having the gap here, you put the gap over here. I'll just put it on there, and I'll just walk it around the same way. Just using my thumb holding it in and my finger here. And it goes right in just like that. And then, so let me show you something. These are kind of easy, right? Because these are a little bit bigger. But when you get into some really high performance racing pistons, you have a lot thinner of a spring, thinner rings. You know, these are a lot thicker. They go with the thinner rings. They're just more expensive. They're hard and lightweight. They're a little bit more difficult to put in, mainly the oil rings. But these, I don't know if you can see this, there's a little bit of a lip on each one of these right here, on both sides of it. And that's what these rings sit on when you put them in, right? They sit on that lip right there on both sides. So when you put them in, these go in super easy. You usually can't mess these up, but you want to make sure once you got them in that they're spinning free, in and out, side to side, or whatever. But you always want to put the gaps back where they are. And then on this spring itself, the gap is right here. So that's pretty much how you do those. On really high dollar pistons that's got the small rings and the small spring, they can be challenging to get them on the spring without getting caught between the piston and the spring. If that happens, they will get stuck. I had an engine in here not long ago that had 2 cylinders. They didn't have them on correctly, and these thin rings they were stuck because they wasn't floating in there. They were stuck between the piston and that spring, and they had folded down and they were grinding the piston and the cylinder wall up like really bad. We ended up rebuilding that motor, but you know, that can happen. So anyway, that's that. So this is number 2 cylinder. All right, here's my number 2. This is my second ring and the top ring. The top ring has a moly coating on the outside of it. It's a lot shinier. And a lot of rings too will be, they have a top and a bottom to them. Some rings are different. You just have to, you know, see which ones you have. These particular rings, the second ring has a top to it. It says top right there. And there's a bevel on the inside of this ring facing down. That's why it's got a top to it. There's no bevel on the inside or the outside of this ring. On the top side, the bevel is only on the inside on the bottom of the ring. So that's really important. You want to make sure that you put that on right. And I've done it for years without using these, but I can tell you this is a lifesaver right here. So just make sure it's facing up where it says top. You can actually adjust this so you don't overstretch the ring. So basically what it says to do is your second ring, they're saying to put the second ring, the gap in between these 2 gaps for the oil ring. So I'm just opening it up, taking my time, putting it in there. Just like that. So I've already checked these, but before you even put the O-rings on, what you want to do is you want to get the ring and you want to kind of walk it through the groove in the piston all the way around. Make sure it goes in, because sometimes you can get these rings that might have a little burr on them or a nick, or the piston might have a little burr or a nick in this groove, and it will cause this ring to stick and not move freely, and that's not good. So if you do ever get into that situation, you can just use some emery cloth or something to file the little nick out of the ring and also out of the piston. It's not a big deal, and just make sure you clean it real good. So the second ring goes in between that gap of that oil ring and that gap of that oil ring. And then the top ring, these particular top rings, there's not a top and a bottom to them. They don't have any type of bevel on the inside, top, bottom, out, nothing. Typically, if you have a top ring that has a bevel, it's usually on the inside and it's always facing up. The bevel would always be up on the top ring, the bevel down on the second ring. But these, they don't have a bevel to them. So you can put them on any way. And then this particular one, since the second ring gap is back here, we're going to just go to the opposite side of it. Just like that. And that's pretty much it. Then, after I got them on, I've got my bearings all cleaned up, laying right here. You got a groove or a little dimple sticking out, and then the rod has a little dimple right there. You just line that up. I always put that flat on the dimple side and then just use both fingers to push it down evenly on the other side. And that's pretty much it. And you want to make sure it's clean, you know, even in between the bearing and the rod. And then you do the same thing with this cap. Make sure it's good and clean. You got these 2 little dimples, they line up, and then you push it in. Now, these, it doesn't matter. There's not a top and a bottom to these bearings. You get into some high dollar stuff like aftermarket rods, there will be a top and a bottom. The top is going to be the one that goes on the rod. The bottom will be the one that goes on the cap. And the reason they do that is they're offset. And if if you get them mixed up, they'll come in a package. They'll come in 2 packages. You'll have all the bearings in one package that will be for top. All the other bearings will be in another package for bottom. And they'll say, usually it'll have a U on it for upper, and then it'll have an L for lower. So it's upper and lower, top, bottom, same thing. But that's pretty much it. And see, you can see the little dimple there, they go together. And I'm just going to put that on there just for now. And that's it. This side's a thicker side that goes against the crankshaft. This is a little bit of a thinner side. And what I mean by thick or thin is, you know, this has more of a space here than it does here. That's all. This side goes against the other rod. This side goes against the crank. And that's it. So my battery's about to die. It's at 9%. So I'm going to go ahead and get this camera straight first of all. I'm going to go ahead and finish these up. I've got 3 rods left to do. I've got number 4, 6, and 8 cylinder, and then they'll be done. And then at that point, I'll get everything lubed up, bearing lube or assembly lube on the bearings. I'll put a little assembly lube, so the assembly lube will go on the bearings. I'll put some assembly lube in here. These are all lubed up already. They're fitting real nice. But I like to throw a little assembly lube on one side, a little assembly lube on the other, work it back and forth. Because it takes a little bit before the oil starts splashing up as the rotation is going. That's why it's important when you actually break one of these engines in, you want to run it for about 20 minutes. Now this is a hydraulic roller camshaft. If you had a flat tappet cam, you really need to run it longer than 20 minutes. On a hydraulic roller, you don't have to worry about it too much. You're not really breaking in the cam per se. 20 minutes at 2,000 to 2,500 RPM, what you're doing is you're seating the rings to the cylinder wall. You don't want to run them at idle. You want to have some sort of load on it, take it to about 2,000 to 2,500 and leave it there. And as long as you don't have any leaks or it doesn't overheat. If you start having an issue with leaks or it overheats, you just shut it down instantly. You let it cool down. You fix the issue, top the water off, whatever you got to do if it's low on coolant, and then you crank it right back up, and then you run it right back at 2,000 to 2,500 again. Finish the 20-minute break-in period for the rings. And while it's running at that RPM, it will also be splashing oil up in here to lubricate these. But that's why I like to put some assembly lube in there to really slicken it up before that oil gets in there. So that's pretty much it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish these last three up, and then we'll be dropping the pistons in. Well, we got the short block done on the small block Chevy. So all I got left to do is put the oil pump on, put the oil pan on, and a timing cover. She's looking good. I went ahead and checked the cam timing to see if it came in exactly where it's supposed to on the cam card. This one here is going to be it's supposed to be 108 intake center line. So I actually took it to about 110. That's actually retarding the cam timing 2 degrees. So this cam will actually pull. So here's the cam card. This cam, if it came in at 108 degrees intake center line, it will pull from 2,400 to 6,000. So we have a intake, an old school intake in the box right there. You can see it sticking up. It's a wind intake, single plane. That one will pull to 6,500. It actually pulls from 2,500 to 6,500. So with the heads that we're using, I wanted this cam to pull up to about 6,200. Don't really need to go up much more than that. We want to try to keep some of the torque in here, the mid-range torque. because it is going in a truck. Even though the truck is light, it only weighs about 3,200 pounds, we still want all that mid-range torque, and we want it to pull up to about 6,200. If I was to make this cam pull up to 6,500, then we would lose more bottom end. So I don't want to do that. So it's coming together nice, you know. This thing's going to make decent power. And the next thing I want to do, put the timing cover on it. Black timing cover, black oil pan. And we'll be ready to rock and roll. Okay, well, we got this long block done on this small block Chevy. So it's turning out really nice. I got the water pump on, we got the oil pan timing cover on, the balancer. I got the timing pointer on, made sure we had true top dead center for that. I went ahead and marked the balancer for the timing marks. So when we do fire this thing up, I want to set the distributor up to have my initial timing, have the advanced timing as I want it, and then lock it out at a total timing. We got to keep the timing under control on this thing so we don't get no detonation, and it's still going to perform well. So let me turn this camera around so we can get a closer look at this thing. So it came out really nice. I make sure that the blocks are super clean. For the paint, that's a Chevy orange, and we went with a new oil pan. The other one was just in bad shape. The pan it came already painted black, so I didn't have to do anything with that. We've got AFR 195cc heads on it with the 202 valves, and this is a Summit Racing bracket racer balancer. We use them on a lot of our builds. They're very affordable and they hold up very well when you're throwing some power to them. And of course we got a new timing cover, which is also, it came black, and I put a chrome timing tab on there. We've got a brand new water pump on it. It's not a rebuild, it's just a stock replacement, new water pump, and we've got it all painted up real nice. And I've already got the cover for the fuel pump on. It's painted black. I just put these spacers on here to keep everything sealed up until we put the fuel pump on there. And this particular motor's got head studs on it. At the time of ordering, I couldn't get any ARP bolts. They were out of stock, so I went ahead and just got these studs put on there. So yeah, it's coming along good. I went ahead and measured for push rod length. We've got the correct push rod. I've already got these tightened up and adjusted for the right geometry, left and right. You know, your roller rocker tips, you want to adjust these left and right so your tip is dead center on this valve stem here. You know, the left and right, I should say. And then push rod length determines the tip riding in the center of the stem up and down. And I've already done that, and they're on order. So here's the roller rockers that are going to be going on it, 1:5 ratio. And then here's the Howard's hydraulic roller link bar lifters that are going in there with the cam that's in it. It's got the Howard's hydraulic roller camshaft. So yeah, and then here's the screwed in studs and the guide plates that came with the heads. But it turned out really nice. I mean, it's a nice looking deal. So just wanted to go ahead and show you guys the finished long block. Now, as you guys know, I already talked about and showed you his intake and valve covers. And we're gonna be blasting them, cleaning them up real good, and then we'll finish this thing off. So once we get this thing completely assembled with the intake, I'll do another video on this motor, and at that time we'll have the truck back in the shop, and we'll be finishing the truck up. We still got a lot of work to do on it, but once we bring it back in, we're probably just going to finish it up. It'll stay in the shop until it's done. So we've got a lot to do. We got wiring harness to put on. We've got to do the brake lines. All the other brakes are done on it. We just got to bend the brake lines and put them on, and do a little bit on the interior. And we've yesterday I ordered the transmission. So this one also has a Chevrolet Turbo 350 transmission, and I usually get my stuff from TCI Performance Transmissions. So I've already ordered that. It'll be here next week sometime. It's a pretty nice setup. It handles about 575. You know, it's really affordable. Like it's going to have you know, some good stuff in it, not too expensive. It's got a shift kit in it, Ford and manual shift kit. So yeah, it's cool. We're going to go with a 3000 stall TCI converter, and this thing ought to get down the road pretty good, man. So stay tuned for that. We'll definitely get back on that deal when we get the transmission in and you know, finish this thing up. So I want to go ahead and end the video. I appreciate you guys checking this one out, and be sure to check it out the next video when it comes out on this one. If you guys haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the videos when they come out. So we appreciate it. So we'll catch you on the next video.